South Africa, I counted on my own 116 different taxes that we pay. We are the most overly taxed country. We're probably the most overly taxed developing nation in the world. The kinds of taxes that we pay are unjust, are inhumane. They are beyond what apartheid did to us.
Sanibona, ngaphambi singene kwivideo namuhla, ngithi angithathe lethuba ngibonge isupport nothando nesikhombise lona lingaphezulu kokucabanga kwethu. Siyacela niqhubeke nisupporte njalo ngokubuka amavideo ethu, ungakhohlwa ukucomment, ushare, ulike. Siyafisa ukuzwa umbono wakho. Sicela ke singene kwivideo namuhla. Osukwini lanamhlanje ngomhla ka-13 kuJanuwari 2026 eParliament bekuhlangene lapho bekukhona amabhili ambalwa bekufuneka aphasiswe. Kodwa ke esizokhuluma ngayo kule video ilethi into udaba lwe-tax. Ngiyakhumbula ukuthi ngesikhathi ladingida udaba le-tax nale bill, Omphile Mauto we-EFF wakuveza ukuthi sengathi uNational Treasury ngayiyeka lento yokusebenzisa technical language ukuze mayizokhuluma nabantu, ukuze kuzoba ne-public participation ehamba kahle, abantu kukhulunywa ulimi lolo liqondakalayo, kungabi umuntu ofundile kuphela ozobeza ukuthi kukhulunywa ngani. Nawe uyazi-ke uma ngabe uNational Treasury okanye nje uMinister we-Finance inogodongwane ethula i-budget speech yakhe, ziningi kabi izinto sokungazizwa kuze kusize ukuthi kufika ama-analyst akutshela ukuthi la ubekhuluma ngento ethize, la ubekhuluma ngento ethize. Ake ngenza umzekelo, kulo nyaka kwakhulunywa ngento ekuthiwa i-tax bracket creep. Baningi abantu ababengazi leyo nto leyo, including nami. Kodwa uma sebeyichazile sayeza ukuthi ukhuluma ngento ethize. So yingakho-ke u-Omphile Mauto ayikhale ngakho ekuqaleni. Kunya kuveza ukuthi uhulumeni wethu akafuni uku-introduce lento ekuthiwa i-apartheid tax. Kutaxwe abantu laba ababa ngama-beneficiaries e-apartheid. Sizokukhumbula nakho lokho. Ethuliwe-ke ibhili eParliament namuhla. Bakhuluma futhi okunye fanele singakubalekeli. I-tax inesidingo ngoba ukuze u-government ufunction, ukwazi ukusakhela imigwaqo, uvala ama-pothole, wakha ama-bridge, zonke lezo zinto lezo kufandeke into enjenge-public health care, iy'kole, i-funding yamaphoyisa, i-funding yamasosha, zonke lezo zinto lezo zokwenza ukuthi abantu ba-comply when it comes to indaba ze-tax. Kodwa into ekhathaza kakhulu la eSouth Africa ukuthi kune-corruption. So, and okunye okubalulekile la ukuthi ngesikhathi kwakubhala imithetho ye-tax qala yayingakabibiki i-technology lesiphila kuyo, nezinye izindlela zokwenza imali zazingakabibikho, njengokwenza imali through ukuba yi-influencer or okanye i-YouTube. Bonke labo bantu labo ababalwa kuma-category abantu afuneka babhadale i-tax. Yingakho beshintsha umthetho ngoba bafuna ukuthi sonke manje nathi nje la ku-YouTube, lokhu YouTube esinika khona funeka sikudeclare SARS sibhadale i-tax.
Mzansi 2026 is coming with big tax changes and SARS is watching closer than ever before. Let me break it down what this really means for you as a taxpayer. According to tax experts at Tax Consulting SA, SARS spent 2025 upgrading its systems, better e-filings, auto-assessments and powerful audit tools. Seems like that was just a warm-up. In 2026, expect tighter audits, more data tracking, and less room for error. SARS is using AI, data analytics, and third-party information, that is retirement withdrawals, investments, and even foreign income. If you have ever changed tax residency and moved your money offshore or withdrawn from your retirement funds, you are now firmly on SARS radar. Here is a big one, a proposed 20% national tax on online gambling. And that is on top of existing provincial taxes. National Treasury estimates this could raise 10 billion rands. Government seems to be hunting for revenue whenever money moves digitally. For ordinary taxpayers, this means three things. The tax declarations must be accurate, as mistakes will trigger audits. Side income, crypto gains, gambling wins, and foreign assets must be disclosed. That may still rise in the future, so your cost of living crisis is not going away. Bottom line is 2026 is not about paying more tax blindly. It's about being smarter, compliant, and financially educated. Don't let ignorance cost you income. This is your sound money coach, making money simple, out.
Umuzi ubhuti echaza la ngesikhathi uminister ethola i-midterm budget ngo-October, uchazile ukuthi i-SARS i-collecte more than lokho bebe-expectile. Manje bayabona ukuthi uma i-SARS bengayinika ama-resources anele izokwazi ukucollecta kakhulu. Yingakho-ke kwenziwa le nhlelo lezi ezenziwayo. Angikucaphunele-ke inkulumo ekhulunywe ePhalamende bese siyayivala le video. Okunye engicishe ngakukhohlwa, i-tax ibalulekile ngoba abantu abanjengogwede Mantashe bazohola bese bebuka thina njengabantu base-South Africa njengabantu abangawufuni umsebenzi. Abantu abayidlalelayo nje bese belinda i-government. Ibaluleke ngalokho-ke i-tax. Ngicela uzwe la.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, Ministers, Honorable Members. Compliments. Our hearts go out to communities who are hard hit by the floods, more especially in the eastern part of the country and the neighboring Mozambique, the country that is Mozambique. Honorable Speaker, I rise on behalf of Standing Committee on Finance to introduce the Taxation Laws Amendment Bill, TLAB, and Taxation Administration Laws Amendment Bill, TALAB, for consideration and adoption by this House. Taxation is the responsibility borne by all who live and participate in our
Honorable Ngadi, can you please switch off your mic? IT, can you please help? Can proceed, Honorable Member.
Thanks, Speaker. An employed person pays tax on his or her monthly salary through direct taxes such as the personal income tax, PIT. On the other hand, a person who is unemployed still pays tax when buying goods such as groceries and clothes through indirect taxes such as VAT. This reality was clearly illustrated during the tabling of the 2025 budget by the Minister of Finance, Honorable Godongwana, particularly in the public debate around the proposed VAT increase. The purpose of taxation is straightforward. It enables the state to fulfill its constitutional obligations. Tax revenues fund essential public services such as healthcare, education, social grants, and higher education support through institutions such as NSFAS. Without these revenues, the government will be unable to provide services or uphold the democratic gains for which so many South Africans have sacrificed. Without a functioning tax system, our democracy itself will be unsustainable. In South Africa, the obligation to pay taxes arises from legislation such as income tax of 1962, which governs direct taxes, and the Value Added Tax Act 1991, which governs indirect taxes. Let me go into the bills. Taxation Laws Amendment Bill 2025. TLAB seeks to amend several laws, including the Income Tax Act, the Value Added Tax Act, the Customs and Excise Act, and the Carbon Tax Act. Its primary objective is to give legislative effect to the tax policy proposals announced in the 2025 national budget. The key amendments contained in this bill include reducing the threshold for the rising fencing of assessed losses in order to cap abuse and prevent the use of non-commercial losses to avoid tax. 2, aligning the tax treatment of foreign retirement benefits with South Africa's residence-based system of taxation. 3, closing loopholes in asset for sale and amalgamation transactions involving collective investment schemes. 4, reviewing the VAT treatment of airtime vouchers supplied in South Africa for exclusive use in export countries, and implementing phase 2 of the carbon tax. The second bill, Taxation Administrative Laws Amendment Bill. TALAB 2025 focuses on strengthening tax administration, compliance, and enforcement by SARS. It amends administrative provisions across several tax laws to enhance efficiency and certainty. The bill provides for, amongst others, clarification of the meaning of audit certificates issued by public benefit organizations, a simplified customs entry engine for express door-to-door imports and export, clarification of waste arising from the processing of imported goods, the introduction of a customs and excise voluntary disclosure program, enabling the VAT modernization project, inspection of business premises for purposes of taxpayer registration or approval, and clarification of the concept of a bona fide inadvertent error for understatement penalties. Together, the two bills represent a balanced and necessary intervention to promote fairness, compliance, and sustainability within our tax framework. I wish to thank the stakeholders who participated in making oral and written submissions respectively. I also wish to thank honorable members of the committee for their constructive contributions during the deliberation of these two bills. The views expressed underscore the importance of these measures to the fiscus and to the effective administration of our tax system. Honorable Speaker, the committee is satisfied that the two bills strike an appropriate balance between fiscal sustainability, equity, investment promotion, and administrative feasibility. Honorable Speaker, I therefore move that the National Assembly adopt TLAB and TALAB 2025. Now, Kens.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable D.D. Van Ryn.
Madume, Honorable Speaker, and honorable members. We dedicate this submission to the martyrs who perished defending the President of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. And we must also indicate that among them, we also count 32 Cubans who perished during the barbaric attack launched on the Republic of Venezuela by the mad Donald Trump regime. Honorable Speaker, as the MK party, we start this submission from a simple truth. No state can build schools, provide water, create jobs, or house its people of its tax system, or if its tax system is designed to protect the rich and punish the poor. Tax administration is not a technical exercise, we reiterate. It is a political choice. It tells us who matters and who does not. Today, South Africa is collapsing under the weight of inequality. Municipalities are broke, water systems are failing, electricity is unreliable, housing backlogs grow every year, and yet the super rich, multinational corporations, gambling syndicates, and illicit traders continue to legally and illegally drain billions out of this country, while the poor are chased by SARS for every cent. This is the context in which this tax administration bill must be judged. Madam Speaker, South Africa is bleeding through. It's bleeding through transfer pricing by national multinationals, illicit financial flows, counterfeit goods, customs fraud, and a tax system that is regressive and cruel to the working class. Yet what is placed before this House today is a technical bill about donation certificates, voluntary disclosures for customs offenders, and administrative tweaks. This is not reform. This is cosmetic surgery on a terminally ill system. The people of South Africa are not fooled. Under this so-called government of national unity, the economy is run to satisfy rating agencies, foreign investors, and financial markets, not the people who vote, who work, and who suffer. This bill does not tell us how the rich will be taxed fairly, how multinational corporations will be stopped from stealing our wealth, how illicit trade will be crushed, how online gambling billions will be stopped from flowing offshore, or how the tax burden will be lifted from poor households. Instead, it gives relief and protection to the very system that created inequality. As MK Party, we say clearly, you cannot fix a broken society with paperwork while leaving economic power untouched. These amendments are designed to keep global capital comfortable while municipalities collapse and unemployment destroys families. And let us be very clear, in 2026, South Africans will vote in local government elections. They will vote based on few things: whether water comes out of their taps, whether electricity stays on, whether refuse is collected, whether their streets are safe, whether their children have jobs. You cannot fix those problems while your tax system is designed to protect the elite. That is why this bill is not neutral. It is a political. It's a political tool meant to protect the status quo. It protects wealth concentration. It protects economic apartheid. And as we stand here as MK Party, we are clear. We stand for radical economic transformation, not radical paperwork. We stand for a tax system that taxes wealth, stop capital flight, crush illicit trade, and funds real development in our communities. The MK Party rejects this administration's laws amendment bill to help us realize our development goals. Madam Speaker, the South African tax system.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Your time is
not
up.
cosmetic amendments proposed in this bill.
Honorable
We thank you.
Dr. MJ Becker.
Madam Speaker, it's good to see you in the House, and I hope you enjoyed your leave period. I spent my leave trying to think how I could make this topic more interesting, and I failed. So what I present today is effectively a 250-year-old economics lecture applied to our most by-the-book organ of state, Treasury. You see, 2.5 centuries ago, the father of modern economics laid out 4 pillars for good tax policy. And while Adam Smith might have believed in the invisible hand, I present to you a very visible hand. Fairness, certainty, convenience, and efficiency. And when I consider the tax bills before us today, I wonder about these 4 pillars and how closely our government adheres to them. In many ways, South Africa is blessed with a well-functioning Treasury and Revenue Service. Our tax collection, at least in the formal sector, is world-leading. Our experts are well-qualified and capable people. And yet, these institutions are not perfect. The process for making our tax laws leaves a lot of room for improvement. And our overall tax policy is at times a bit questionable. For instance, Madam Speaker, we speak a lot about job creation and attracting investment in this House. And sometimes they are words that ring as hollow as the bellies of our people. Words that are also at times contradicted by our tax laws and their implementation. How do we expect e-commerce businesses to thrive when SARS tells us that it can't start charging VAT on low-value imports because its own IT systems are not yet ready? It's almost like speaking about renewal without actual renewal. And how can we speak about attracting foreign spending when the first version of this bill included provisions that would have potentially led to double taxation of wealthy foreign residents that have decided to spend their retirement savings here in South Africa? That's not pro-growth or pro-jobs. It's like being part of a political party and then running against that political party for another party at the next elections. Of course, that only works if you're the SACP. And even then, what these measures represent, Madam Speaker, is inefficiency and vagueness rather than certainty. You might say it's a loophole in policy direction. And we hope the National Treasury, Honourable Minister, will go after this loophole with the very same veracity as it goes after other tax loopholes. Likewise, it's concerning, Madam Speaker, to hear that when the National Treasury holds workshops, the participants are sometimes held to a kind of secrecy. Public workshops are not meant to be kept from the public. Fairness, certainty, convenience, and efficiency, these are not long dead words. They are principles that any government that cares for its citizens and respects its taxpayers pursues ever closer, year upon year. So, Madam Speaker, I've tried to be optimistic in my analysis today. You could say that I see the glass or the Rustenburg Stadium as half full. And we appreciate and we respect the essential work that SARS and National Treasury does. But we must ask that these institutions keep improving. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. I'm sure as a lecturer, the class will be interested to ask the lecturer to further articulate the analysis on some measures where there were gaps in between. Honourable Mautwe.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Greetings to the President and Commander-in-Chief, officials, members of the Central Command Team, leaders of the EFF in provinces and sub-regional command teams, and more importantly, all fighters and ground forces. As the EFF, we remain the only organization that truly loves Black people and continues to fight for the economic freedom in this lifetime. We are not confused about whose interests we represent, and we're not apologetic about advancing the cause of the working class, the poor, and the marginalized in this country. And this is why we want to call on all fighters and ground forces to descend to East London on the 23rd of January 2026 to show solidarity to our President and Commander-in-Chief as he's been persecuted for his political beliefs and conviction and in defense of our movement. Speaker, the bills before the National Assembly are extremely important pieces of legislation. These are the laws which, through the manner in which we design and implement budgets, determine where and how revenue is collected to fund education, healthcare, policing, defense, and other programs of service delivery. Taxation is not a technical side issue. It's at the center of how the state redistributes resources and responds to inequality. However, if you attended the Standing Committee on Finance when we were dealing with these bills back in September 2025, you'd agree with us that based on what those who made submissions said, the dismissive response by the National Treasury, and what is ultimately contained in the committee reports, this entire process is treated as a tick box exercise. If anything, parliamentary oversight over taxation has been reduced to an administrative inconvenience rather than being treated as a constitutional obligation for Parliament to meaningfully decide on taxation matters. What makes matters worse, Speaker, is that these bills are deliberately presented as complex instruments written in unnecessary technical language that systematically excludes the majority of our people from understanding why they are being taxed. People earn a salary and they are taxed. They buy food, they are taxed. They pay for babysitter services, they are taxed. They are taxed on money that has already been taxed. Yet those who draft these laws do not want to explain in a language people understand why they are being taxed in the manner that they are being taxed. This deliberate vagueness serves particular interests, and it is certainly not the interest of the poor and the working class. Now, members, we know that SARS does not treat everyone equally. That is a fact. As much as SARS and the National Treasury would not want to admit this, the truth of the matter is that we are dealing with either poor legislative design, inconsistent enforcement, or selective application of the law. This is a problem that we as members of parliament continue to refuse to fix, even when political and implementable proposals are tabled before this House. To this day, we still do not have legislation that decisively deals with illicit financial flows, tax avoidance, and base erosion, which are being practiced by the majority of large companies, including those listed in the JSE. These are not small issues. These are the structural leakages that deprive the state of billions in revenue that could be used to address unemployment, poverty, and inequality. Instead, we're all made to focus on tobacco smugglers and so-called influencers as if they are the primary source of revenue leakage. We're not saying that these activities should not be dealt with, but we must ask why the former Royal Bafokeng CEO, Neil Carroll, is sitting with a 630 million tax dispute. How did we arrive at this situation, and what does it say about the effectiveness of our tax administration system? He's not the only one. The former CEO of Pepkor, Lon Erasmus, is reportedly sitting with a tax dispute of more than 300 million rands. The flower case against SARS is another example of how SARS has fumbled some of these high-profile cases. Either our laws are weak, or SARS is incompetent, or there is a selective tolerance for minimal taxation among certain elites. All three possibilities point to a serious crisis in our tax system. We asked an important question in the committee and never received the proper answer. Is there anyone in this House who still has confidence in SARS' ability to administer taxation equitably across all income groups and races? Because to an ordinary South African worker, it appears that the wealthy and politically connected can always negotiate their way around paying taxes, while workers face deductions that they cannot negotiate, delay, or avoid. Speaker, we have also raised issues concerning the sugar lobby industry, which has successfully negotiated with the National Treasury for no inflationary increases on excise duties, and the health promotion levy, commonly known as the sugar tax. Someone was lobbied, and it was not members of parliament. There was no comment or assessment by the Department of Health, no impact studies, and no serious justification provided to this House. At the same time, illicit trade in alcohol and tobacco is completely out of control, yet there is no effort to revise the assumptions and policy frameworks that govern how these products are taxed. This does not come as a surprise because the reality today is that our taxation laws respond more to the fears and whims of banks, mining companies, insurance industry, and the private sector broadly than to the lived realities of our people. What is even worse is that the National Treasury knows, and everyone in this House knows, that we spend more as a society cleaning up the social and economic costs of alcohol abuse in our communities than what we collect through alcohol taxation. Yet, this reality does not translate into bold, progressive tax policy. South Africa's taxation system can no longer honestly be described as progressive or redistributive. How do you describe taxation as progressive in the most unequal society in the world, a society that has effectively made unemployment a permanent condition of a black life? There is a fundamental contradiction here that Treasury refuses to confront. Why is there such strong resistance to the introduction of a wealth tax, even when the majority of people in this House agree that it must be introduced? Whose interests are being protected and at whose expense? Lastly, Speaker, we must end the employment tax incentive. Either the claims associated with this policy are fraudulent or the policy is simply not working. Unemployment continues to rise, yet this incentive is treated as an unquestionable instrument. In reality, it has become an accounting mechanism that allows employers to reduce their costs while increasing their profits. We reject this.
The next speaker is the Honorable Radebe.
Thank you, House Chairperson. The Taxation Laws Amendment Bill and the Tax Administration Laws Amendment Bill are two critical pieces of legislation that together shape not only how revenue is raised, but how fairly, efficiently, and transparently South Africa's tax system is administered. Taxation is the lifeblood of the state. It funds public service, redistributes resources, and underpins social economic development. However, for a tax system to command legitimacy, It must be fair, predictable, and competently administered. In an economy under severe strain, tax policy choices must support growth, protect the vulnerable, and avoid placing disproportionate burdens on compliant taxpayers. We note that the Taxation Laws Amendment Bill introduces a wide range of technical amendments across income tax, VAT, customs and excise, carbon tax, and global minimum tax legislation. While many of these amendments are necessary to close loopholes, clarify provisions, and align South Africa with international tax standards, we caution that increasing complexity in the tax system disproportionately harms small businesses, emerging enterprises, and individual taxpayers who lack access to specialized advice. We further note amendments relating to retirement funds, savings components, and severance benefits. While the intention to strengthen retirement security is understood, these changes must be communicated clearly and consistently to the public. Too many South Africans already mistrust the tax system due to poor communication and frequent rule changes. Tax policy must encourage savings and long-term planning, not create uncertainty or fear. We welcome provisions aimed at modernizing tax administration, including measures relating to electronic reporting, streamlined customs procedures, and voluntary disclosure mechanisms. These reforms have the potential to improve efficiency, reduce delays, and support legitimate trade and business activity. However, we remain concerned about the balance of power between SARS and taxpayers. While SARS must be empowered to combat tax evasion, illicit trade, and non-compliance, this authority must be exercised within clear legal safeguards. Provisions that expand administrative discretion must be matched by strong oversight, transparent processes, and accessible avenues for objection and appeal. We are particularly mindful of small businesses, informal traders, and rural enterprises, many of whom already struggle with regulatory compliance. Tax administration reforms must not unintentionally criminalize honest mistakes or impose punitive consequences for minor or inadvertent errors. Both bills highlight the broader reality that revenue collection alone cannot resolve South Africa's fiscal challenges. Tax compliance improves when citizens see their contributions translated into quality public services, functioning infrastructure, and ethical governance. The IFP supports the further processing of the Taxation Laws Amendment Bill and the adoption of the Tax Administration Laws Amendment Bill, while reserving the right to engage on specific provisions to ensure that South Africa's tax system remains fair, transparent, and development-oriented. I thank you.
Honorable House Chair, as these titles indicate, the two bills before the House amend both taxation laws and tax administration laws. They give effect to the tax proposals announced during the 25 budget process and seek to improve the efficiency and integrity of South Africa's tax collection system. Taxation and the manner in which it is administered affects every South African. It is therefore imperative that public participation is conducted in a way that is meaningful and enables the public to contribute real-world experiences and insight. Effective public participation improves policy quality, enhances tax morale and compliance, and most importantly, confers legitimacy on the tax system. At a time when South Africans face an ever-widening tax gap, it is essential that taxpayers perceive the system as fair, transparent, and credible. In this regard, Action SA welcomes the introduction of the second leg of public participation and notes a significant reduction in the number of participants compared to the first leg. This is encouraging as it suggests that many of the concerns raised during the initial phase were adequately addressed. That said, both the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants and the audit firm PKF raised concerns regarding the timeframes within the process. These concerns should be carefully considered by the Standing Committee on Finance and National Treasury going forward. Turning to the substance of the bills, Action SA wishes to highlight several notable aspects. Firstly, Action SA welcomes the expansion of the definition of illicit goods within the Custom and Excise Act. While the amendment is modest, any steps to combat the rapidly growing illicit economy must be supported. Illicit trade not only undermines tax collection, devastates legitimate businesses, and destroys decent jobs, but it is also deeply entwined with organized criminal activity, including corruption, extortion, kidnapping, murder, and illegal immigration. Much more remains to be done, and Action SA looks forward to the Standing Committee on Finance playing a leading role in exposing and confronting this growing threat. Secondly, with regards to Section 18A donation certificates, it is essential that the interpretation note to be issued provides clear and practical guidelines. Donations are the lifeblood of many NGOs. However, Section 18A certificates are vulnerable to fraud and administration errors. Strengthening the framework for issuing these certificates without imposing unnecessary compliance burdens on legitimate NGOs is therefore both necessary and urgent. Thirdly, Action SA supports enhanced powers granted to SARS officials for tax administration purposes to inspect businesses in order to verify their existence and legitimacy. Far too much tax fraud occurs in the absence of even the most basic verification controls. Strengthening these controls is a necessary step in reducing the tax gap and restoring confidence in the system. Lastly, the proposal that attracted significant public comment relates to the reduction of the threshold for ring-fence assessed losses from a 45% to a 39% marginal tax rate for suspect trades. While Action SA supports this amendment, it is critical that tax policy does not inadvertently stifle legitimate entrepreneurship, an essential ingredient for reviving our stagnant economy. At the same time, where trades are demonstrably suspect and are used primarily as a vehicle for income tax avoidance, even further tightening of this applicable margin rate should be considered. House Chair, in conclusion, as instruments that give effect to the recent budget proposals and in order to improve the efficiency of the tax administration, Action SA supports these two bills. I thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is the Honorable Swart.
Thank you, House Chair. House Chair, the ACDP believes in following the scriptural injunction, render unto Caesar what is due unto Caesar, and unto God what is due unto God. Now, these tax bills are of a highly technical nature and largely seek to enhance compliance. What we do see, and we recommend, and we commend SARS for the higher than expected revenue collection, an additional 19.7 billion over and above what was projected, driven by improved compliance and enforcement measures, which includes a focus on the illicit economy. An additional 7.5 billion was allocated to SARS to boost its capabilities, and this is expected to yield significant returns. Yet, sadly, over the medium term, revenue projections are expected to be weaker due to lower nominal GDP growth and downward revisions to corporate income and personal income tax rates. Now, that is clearly concerning, and higher economic growth is required. Certain amendments contained in these bills refer to technical refinements in the two-pot retirement systems. Now, many employees drawing from the two-pot system were shocked at the amount of tax they were required to pay. Employees need to be better educated that this will be a direct result of the early drawing from their retirement funds and will reduce the amount available for retirement. On VAT and other indirect tax issues contained in the bill, the ACDP notes concerns about the impact of proposed changes on independent schools, and we welcome the fact of the deferral arrangement for such schools. As far as the tax administration bill is concerned, the most extensive submissions related to refinements to what is known as the understatement penalty framework. Certain stakeholders were concerned about the bona fide inadvertent error concept, believing that the penalties should only apply where conduct offends the public interest. Now, National Treasury and SARS responded that understatement penalties has always been behavioral based and that no penalty can be imposed unless the taxpayer's conduct falls within the behaviors listed within the table. This the ACDP appreciates. We also appreciate the fact that penalties are subject to objection and appeal, and that reliance on professional advice, as many taxpayers do, continues to be recognized as a factor indicating reasonable behavior on behalf of the taxpayer. Chairperson, the ACDP appreciates this expectation, the explanation and the technical amendments, and as kingdom builders, we will support these bills. Thank you, Honourable Minister, and everything.
Thank you. Honourable Kwankwa.
We support share note declaration.
Thank you. The Honourable Ghana.
Nekhenza Mthomasitolo nalembele rintsha bahlonipheki. I rise in support of both the Tax Administration Laws Amendment Bill and the Taxation Laws Amendment Bill, which together represent important steps in strengthening the efficiency, fairness, and credibility of our tax system. At the center of this amendment is the VAT modernization project, a necessary and overdue reform. Our economy is evolving rapidly, driven by digitalization, e-commerce, a new business model that did not exist when many of our tax systems were designed. SARS must therefore be equipped with modern, integrated, and data-driven systems that allow for real-time reporting and better verification and faster processing. Honorable members, the bills also address customs and excise duties on important goods with a value of 500 rands or less. This is a critical intervention. The growth of online shopping and small consignments entering the country has exposed weaknesses in customs administration, creating unfair competition for local businesses and revenue leakages for the state. By tightening the treatment of low-value imports, we promote fairness, revenue protection, and compliance, while also safeguarding domestic industries that compete against goods entering our market undervalued or misdeclared thresholds. Customs modernization is essential to securing our borders economically, not just physically. More broadly, these bills underscore the urgent need to modernize our tax systems so that it keeps pace with technological change, global trade patterns, and evolving taxpayer behavior. A modern tax administration improves compliance, reduces administrative costs, and ensures that government has the resources required to fund essential public services. Finally, honorable members, I want to highlight the importance of the proposed national online gambling tax. Gambling, particularly online gambling, is expanding rapidly, often outpacing regulation. While taxation is necessary, it must also be purposeful. Revenue generated from online gambling should be ring-fenced to support education, research into gambling addiction, prevention programs, and rehabilitation services. No country has ever gambled its way to prosperity. We must ensure that while the state collects revenue, it also addresses the social harm associated with gambling addiction, especially amongst young and vulnerable South Africans. In conclusion, these bills strengthen administration, modernize taxation, enhance compliance, and protect both revenue and society. And it is for these reasons that I support both the bills.
Thank you. Dr. Moimane.
Honorable members, Bachait Sudumelang, and I wish you all a prosperous and a happy new year, as it were. Chairperson, I think it's important as this House considers these two pieces of legislation that speaks to tax laws, that we keep in mind the fundamental purpose of tax. Ultimately, and tax authority is about the collection of that tax, giving legal certainty to taxpayers, but ultimately it is also to increase the number of taxpayers. No country has ever taxed itself into prosperity. And the job that we've got to do is to ask the fundamental question, which is, how do we move 10 million South Africans, who many of them sit between the lower quintiles in our income levels, to the middle class? so that we can increase the amount of people who pay tax, stabilize our society by having a growing middle class, and ensure that we reduce levels of inequality. To be able to do that, tax law then ultimately becomes important. The second component of this issue is that tax law must always be globally competitive. The job we've got to do is to make sure that when an investor looks as to which country they are going to look at, South Africa must be considered. And at this point in time, honorable members, we could politicize the question about where we set corporate tax, but the reality of it is international benchmarking is starting to peg corporate tax at closer to 15%, whereas ours is nearly double that. So our consideration must be, how do we make South Africa investable and a place where we can attract global investment? Thirdly, it's about the effective use of that tax. Let's be fair, honorable members. South Africans are taxed and are taxed heavily at a personal level. It's not only just income tax and VAT, it's property taxes, it's fuel levies, it's multiple types of taxes. And worse, we find many government institutions who are not using the tax more effectively. There's an additional burden when citizens pay for tax to keep up hospitals, and then you arrive at a hospital like Frere Hospital and you discover that actually money is being wasted. So Honorable Swart, I agree with you. We need to give to Caesar what is due to Caesar, but we need to make sure that Caesar remains sober, honest, and ultimately using of taxpayer money effectively. Honorable member, I want to highlight the fact that, Minister, can we pause, Honorable? Can you stop my time?
Now, don't get distracted by the minister, Honorable Maimane. Continue.
I conclude by asking the inherent question, honorable members, that we need to increase our taxation on online gambling. I think we can ultimately ensure that the 6% that is extended to horse racing can be extended to other types of online betting and taxation. Therefore, in conclusion, honorable members, I want to say that I will reject any form of VAT increases coming next year. We need to grow the economy to ensure that we increase taxpayers and make sure that our economy is not stagnant, but one that can deliver more revenues for us to achieve our objectives of increasing more taxpayers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The Honorable Zungula.
Thank you, Chair. South Africans already face a heavy tax burden. We cannot allow amendments that act as a hidden tax increases or erode exemptions for ordinary families. The ATM calls for indexing tax brackets and rebates to inflation, protecting the real incomes of our citizens. We also insist that any changes to retirement savings or long-term investments do not discourage saving or erode retirement security. Our people need jobs. SMMEs are the engine of employment. Therefore, any tax reform must support SMMEs, especially those in rural areas, townships, and historically disadvantaged communities. We also encourage tax incentives for strategic sectors such as manufacturing, technology, labor-intensive industries, which create meaningful employment and drive growth. Modernizing tax administration must protect taxpayers' rights, uphold privacy, and strengthen mechanisms for appeal. It must also fight corruption and tax evasion, but with education and support, not punitive measures that crush honest taxpayers. However, Chair, we must also highlight a serious shortcoming of these bills. They fail to adequately address the issue of illicit financial flows and illicit trade, which cost our economy billions of rands every year. Loopholes in the tax system and weaknesses in enforcement mean that large sums of money leave the country illegally or evade proper taxation, while honest citizens and small businesses bear the burden. Any meaningful tax reform must tackle these issues head on. Finally, we call for an ongoing consultation with the public. Tax policy should never be rushed without full stakeholder engagement. A tax system that is crafted with the people for the people is the one that is legitimate and just. The ATM supports a progressive tax reform that is fair, transparent, and growth-orientated. We look will back amendments that protect households and encourage savings, promote inclusive economic growth and job creation, modernize tax administration in a fair and balanced manner, enhance compliance while upholding the rights of taxpayers, address illicit financial flows and illicit trade to safeguard revenue and protect honest businesses. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is the Honorable Makubela.
Honorable House Chairperson and honorable members, these bills may be technical in form, but their impact is profoundly human. They touch children whose future depends on support reaching them in full, families striving for dignity, workers and entrepreneurs building livelihoods, educators shaping human capital, and industries sustaining our economy. Tax policy is one of the few instruments that speaks to all of us across parties, sectors, and communities. It is where fiscal responsibility meets social justice and where economic growth must be reconciled with fairness. These bills remind us of the truth that should unite this House. A fair and a credible system is not an obstacle to growth. It is the foundation of trust between the state and its people. When we approach tax policy with balance, cooperation, and a shared purpose, we strengthen not only the economy, but the social contract that binds us as South Africans. It is in the spirit of common unity and responsibility that we debate the Taxation Laws Amendment Bill and the tax administration bills today. Honorable members, the reinstatement of the exemption of the child maintenance is a step that deserves broad support. It affirms a principle that unites us. Support intended for children must reach them in full. This amendment strengthens family stability, supports caregivers who are most often women, and reinforces the state's commitment to child welfare. It is a reminder that a humane tax system strengthens social cohesion, which ultimately benefits the economy as a whole. Honorable members, the inclusion of the amounts assigned to non-retirement member spouses in cases of a marriage dissolution under religious tenets is a mature and inclusive legislative approach. It recognizes the diversity of South African families and ensures that financial protection does not depend on a form of a marriage. This is not about special treatment, honorable members. It is about an equal protection under law, a principle that should unite this House. The exemption of educational activities by basic education institutions is another form of consensus. Education is not a cost to be minimized. It is an investment in productivity, citizenship, and a future growth. By reducing administrative tax burdens on schools, we strengthen the foundation upon which every sector of the economy depends. The extension of the Urban Development Zone tax incentive to March 2030 provides certainty and continuity. It supports urban renewal, infrastructure investments, and job creation in areas that needs it the most. Importantly, the incentive offers us an opportunity to ensure that development is inclusive, transparent, and socially beneficial with proper oversight and accountability. The additional reduction for the domestic production of battery, electric, and hydrogen-powered vehicles speaks to a shared future-oriented growth and a vision. The incentive positions South Africa to participate meaningfully in the global green transition, supporting industrialization, skills development, and the export competitiveness. It is an example of how tax policy can crowd in investment rather than crowded out. Honorable House Chairperson, the low-value importation exemption reflects the realities of a modern digital economy and supports small businesses engaging in cross-border trade. Similarly, the 1 billion diesel relief provides necessary support to sectors that underpin food security, logistics, and industrial activity. These measures recognize that economic resilience is built by supporting productive capacity during periods of pressure. House Chair, as the House considers these bills, we are reminded that progressive tax reforms must do more than raise revenue. It must advance social outcome, unlock productive capacity, protect the vulnerable, and reinforce confidence in the state. Taken together, the Taxation Laws Amendment Bill and the Tax Laws Administration Bill demonstrates that tax policy can be a powerful developmental instrument. When guided by equity, inclusivity, and strategic intent, they show that we do not have to choose between growth and fairness. We can build and must build by pursuing both together. At the time when South Africans look upon this House for leadership, honorable members, let us send a clear and a united message that despite our differences, we can cooperate in the national interest, align fiscal tools with developmental goals, and build an economy that works for all of us. It is for these reasons, and in the spirit of unity, cooperation, and a common purpose, that ANC supports the first reading of the Taxation Laws Amendment Bill and the second reading of the Tax Administration Laws Amendment Bill. I thank you, honorable members.
The Speaker, on behalf of Good. If not, I recognize the Honorable Reddy.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair. We have heard three versions of the same story. The DA gave us Adam Smith and investor confidence. The ANC gave us unity, incentives, and soft language about social cohesion. And the last speaker from the ANC neither confronted the real economic power in this country. My honorable colleagues, South Africans are not suffering because we lack exemptions, incentives, or certificates. They are suffering because they are being taxed to death while the wealthy escape. Workers pay PAYE before they even touch their salaries. The poor pay VAT on food, electricity, and transport. Small businesses drown in compliance. Yet the real wealth of this country lies in mining houses, in banks, in retail giants, multinationals, and gambling platforms. It is carefully protected by this system. That is where the money is. And the reality, friends, is that white monopoly capital still controls the commanding heights of this economy, and it avoids tax through profit shifting, transfer pricing, offshore structures, and digital platforms that extracts billions while declaring crumbs to South Africans. Online gambling alone drains hundreds of billions of rands out of this country every year. And Honorable Maimani, as MK Party, we're not saying increase the taxes on online gambling. We're saying ban online gambling altogether, because the money that can be used on these platforms should be building schools, should be fixing sewage plants, and creating jobs. But instead, it enriches a few corporations while destroying families. Yet what does this GNU offer us? The DA worries about wealthy foreigners being taxed twice. The ANC speaks of exemptions, incentives, and unity. But no one in this GNU asks, who owns the wealth? Who controls the economy? Who is paying? Honorable House Chair, South Africa is one of the most unequal societies on earth. The richest 1% owns more wealth than the bottom 90%. That is not an accident. It is the outcome of political choices. This bill does not challenge that reality. It simply manages it. It protects global capital, large importers, multinational corporations, and financial elites. It does not protect municipalities that cannot pay Eskom, communities that are drowning in sewage, youth that don't have jobs, or families that are crushed by debt. This is why this debate is really about 2026. And listen to me very carefully, because the next local government elections, people will not vote based on tax incentives and green vehicles. They will vote based on whether the taps work, whether their streets are clean, whether the lights stay on, whether their children have a future. And you cannot fix local government while trillions leave this country through illicit trade, capital flight, and digital exploitation. The GNU is protecting white monopoly capital. MK fights for economic justice. We say tax wealth, stop capital flight, crush illicit trade, end gambling, looting, and fund communities. This bill does none of that. And that is why MK Party will reject this bill, not because we oppose tax, but because we refuse to accept an economy designed to keep the rich rich and the poor poor. And in 2026, the people will remember who stood with them and who hid behind nice words while inequality continues. They will choose MK Party. Mark my words. Mark this day. Thank you.
Nezethulo lezi ezenziwe mayelana nodaba lwebhili le elethwe iSARS ukuthi funa kwenziwe njani kubhekwe ini zonke lezi zinto lezi bezikhulunywa ama-argument ke lawa avela kuma political parties ehlukene futhi okunye okusemqoka efuneka siqaphele ukuthi nalabo abayirejectayo le bill abayirejecti ngoba bebengafuni ukuthi abantu bathexwe kodwa into abayikhalelayo ukuthi abathexwa abantu kodwa imali abathexwa ayibonakale phela imisebenzi ukuthi abantu bayathexwa akubonakale ukuthi abantu sebethexisiwe imali yenzini ngoba mina nawe siyayikhokha itax kodwa imigwaqo yethu namhlanje ayilungisiwe i-defense forces underfunded amaphoyisa they are underfunded ibhedlela namakliniki they are underfunded yizo zonke ezinye zezinto lezi kanti enye into eyinkinga kakhulu ubaba uMoletsi imbheka kakhulu mangayo ukuthi ama-public servants ahola imali eningi kakhulu ngoba uma uyi-member of parliament uhola about 1.2 or 1.1 million per year imali nje oyitholayo okusho abantu bakhona imali yabe around ilapha around 100,000 per month or 100 and something thousand rand per month so imali eningi igcina iphuma ikhokhela ama-public servants kunokuthi leyo mali le invest yakhomuthi i-DA yathi eSouth Africa sinayo inkinga yemali sinenkinga we have a spending problem South Africa nje ine spending problem not ukuthi kushort imali so kodwa uzwile zibekiwe izinto ezikhulunyiwe mina nawe kasidibane kwivideo elandela ngikubone kubalekile ukuthi zikhulunywa zonke lezi zinto lapha eParliament angikwazise ngalolu daba mhlambe masingathola ithuba ngelinye ilanga sizoyixoxa nje lolu daba kahle sinesikhathi singajahili kodwa kanamhlanje bekufuneka ngikulethele inkulumo eqondile ukuze uzazi inguquko ezikhona ngiwabhekile ama-channel ngathola ukuthi awalikhulumi lolu daba ngiyazi ke ngiyasiqonda futhi isizathu ngoba abantu base South Africa nifuna indaba ezitrendayo so lezi siyasizikhiphe kule channel ngenxa yemvume enanginika yona ukuthi hayi uma zikhona indaba ezinje angoziletha ukuze nizazi nami ngiziletha ngalokho ngoba noma ngwenzile ama-video ningiphoci niyawabuka ilokho nje kungikhuthazayo ukuthi makunodaba oluthinta i-NSFAS nginginenzela ivideo nginazise mina nawe kasidibane kwivideo elandelayo ngiyabonga kakhulu